I'm thrilled that you're here. Please say hi to Chewbacca. Well, she does a little submissive smile. Yes, I love you too. And this is Rebel. Okay, hop down. Hey, welcome everybody. Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Welcome to CameraSweets. I'm going to dive right into a new type of format called Reddit Reads. And the idea is to read some Reddit posts, share our opinions, and in this particular case, kind of answer the question of, is this rape? So I'm going to be trying a few new formats. I have a few different ideas and I'm hoping that you enjoy them. If you do, please let me know by liking the video or commenting down in the comments below. There's two types of penetration. One has to do with any body part or object being inserted into the front or the back. Doesn't matter whether you're male or female. Another way that penetration works is if sex organ enters the mouth. So there's three parts to consent, and I'm going to go over them real quick. There's disclosure. The second is competency. And the third is voluntary. Disclosure refers to both parties understanding what they're agreeing to. As far as, it being voluntary, the person can't be coerced, they can't be threatened, they can't, it needs to be a voluntary conclusion and decision that they're making while they're competent. So with that being said, I'm going to jump back to competency. So when it comes to competency, there's a few things that can actually negate consent if the person is found not competent at the time when they were giving consent. This includes things like alcohol and drugs. Is the person unconscious? Incest is always considered sexual assault. Another thing is age related. Somebody cannot give consent if they are too young. Pretty much every state has a minimum. It's usually about 12 years old. Anyone below 12 years old cannot give consent. They're not old enough, they don't understand. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. If they're below 12 years old, they cannot give consent. Between the ages of about 12 and 17, depending on what state you're in, there's also issues with consent there. Two 16-year-olds decide to have intercourse. That's a little bit different and wouldn't be considered an age-related problem. But if somebody is, say 16 and 42, there's going to be some issues there. Another thing that comes into play is special needs. Now, this may be something physical, mental, a behavioral issue, but something that diminishes the capacity of the person giving consent. Along the same lines, a mental defect comes into play. So basically, if you're going to have intercourse with somebody, make sure they're the right age, that they're consciously making this decision, that they have the mental, physical, and emotional wherewithal to make that decision, and that they're verbally communicating it with you. A lot of times people think that they need to say no in order to get somebody to stop. However, that's not the case. People need to give consent first. And if there is no consent, then anything that happens after that can be considered sexual assault. Somebody needs to give consent. And it's important to know that consent can be retracted at any time. Remember, consent must be freely given, is reversible, meaning again, you can retract that statement. So just because somebody gave permission or agreed to have intercourse with somebody doesn't mean that that's forever now. It must be informed. And this is what I was talking about before. Both parties must understand what they're agreeing to. It must be enthusiastic. If you ask somebody and they say no, that means no. Don't keep pushing, don't keep asking, don't try to convince them, don't try to coerce them, because that's getting into sexual assault. When somebody says no, it means no. And consent needs to be specific. You need to be completely aware of what you're agreeing to, what you're not agreeing to, as well as when to start, when to stop, and things like that. The first Reddit post that we're going to go over is called, "Is this rape though?" I went to a guy's house willingly to sleep with him, and he ended up having another guy over. I didn't know or expect another person to be there. He put his hands on my shoulders and walked me upstairs to the bedroom. I went towards the front door, but he told me no and walked me upstairs instead. Right off the bat, I'm not really liking how this is sounding. In the room, I was crying and was very obviously shaking. He asked me if I trusted him, and I didn't respond, to which he answered for me and said, yes. I know my body language showed that I didn't want to, but I never actually said no. Does this even count as rape? All right, so, oh gosh. Let's look at some of the responses. So one of the top responses says, he forced you upstairs. You were in the room crying. He asked if you trusted him. You didn't answer, so the answer was obviously no. He decided to answer for you and said yes. Who has sex with a person who is crying and obviously scared? I don't have all the details, but from what you said, yeah, it sounds pretty rapey. And I'm totally on board with what this person says. Scumbag-o-meter is definitely off the charts right now. This does not count as consent. But on top of that,
why would you want to have intercourse with somebody who's crying and upset and doesn't want to have intercourse with you?
There's, something wrong with this person that this is what they're looking for. They should probably get therapy and get some help. Another comment is very simple, few short words. Yes, you tried to leave and he stopped you. This is why the laws regarding sexual assault have changed, because we're realizing just because somebody doesn't say no doesn't mean they're giving consent. Another response, again, short and simple, says, yes, you didn't consent. You can contact RAINN if you're in the US. And that's for anybody that does need it. It's RAINN as in RAINN.org. And they have all sorts of resources for people that might need it. Hello. Hello, my name is Rose. I love you. Yes. My little therapy dog here doesn't like when I get upset. And whenever I talk about sexual assault, it just happens. So after reading that, let's discuss a few things here. There are several parts of consent that must happen. So again, there needs to be disclosure. And now this is where I think is the biggest problem here. Both parties need to be aware of what they're consenting to. All of the information needs to be disclosed so that they can agree to it, so that they can give consent for that to happen. You can't consent for something to happen if you don't know what that thing is. So in this case, this person willingly went to this person's house to have sex. However, they were not aware that a second person would be there. Once that happened, once another person was introduced into the situation and the agreement between them was altered, consent is no longer valid. So basically, yes, I do think this is sexual assault. I don't think you had an issue with competency. And as far as things being voluntary, consent can be retracted at any time. You may have given consent for X, Y, and Z to happen. However, when you went over there, something entirely different was happening. And so, first of all, you don't actually have to say no because the situation has changed and therefore you didn't actually consent to what's happening. But on top of that, the fact that you did try to leave and exit the house, the fact that he led you upstairs, the fact that he asked you if you trusted him and you didn't answer and he answered for you, shows that this isn't really voluntary, that this is coerced. When it comes down to it, at the end of the day, what's the verdict? I suggest that you get the services that you need, whether you go to rainn.org, you see a therapist, you talk to someone that you love. As a species, humans try to justify things. We'd rather consider that we're safe and that everything that happened is, okay, than admit that something bad happened. I just want you to know that you're not alone. You're not broken or bad. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't deserve this, and it shouldn't have happened. I agree. This is not okay. The next Reddit post. This one's called, "My partner says I raped them." So let's jump right in and read this. And again, trigger warning. My partner and I both have a CNC kink.
CNC stands for consensual non-consent and deals with fantasies such as rape.
We have an established safe word and have talked about it. However, 3 weeks ago, we were doing the usual. This time I was trying to do something with them. And while they were saying no, they weren't using the safe word. This is how it usually goes. So I continued to press myself onto them. And before I fully went in, I asked, "Are you sure?" Waiting for the safe word. And they said yes. They told me I could do it. So we did what we usually do. However, recently they talked to me about how I crossed the line and that it was really mentally damaging for them. They said I raped them. I was shaking and sobbing when I heard that. I never wanted to do anything like that to anyone. I know that if they said their safe word, I would have stopped immediately. They acknowledged that they didn't say the word, but I still feel like a monster. Did I rape them? And now let's jump into a few edits before we go on. So first edit, it says, they're saying I haven't used the safe word before, so they thought I would know. But I have used it, and I can recall the exact words and the moment in which I said it. They're also saying that they forgot about it. When I did say it, they stopped, so I'm not sure how they forgot. So edit number 2. Should I tell them it wasn't rape? I'm willing to work out things with my partner, and we agreed to no more sexual activity for now. But I also want to be clear it wasn't rape. How do I go about saying it without invalidating their feelings? And let's read some responses. So they're allowed to feel upset or traumatized or whatever the hell they feel, but you guys literally had an agreed upon arrangement and they provided consent repeatedly. Does your partner have some history of trauma or something? They should see someone about it if they do. Otherwise, this is a bizarre claim based on your description of what happened, and I absolutely would not have sex with this person again. They've made it unsafe, and you cannot trust them to communicate with you in that situation. It is unreasonable to expect you to be a mind reader. You ask them repeatedly. If they cannot take responsibility for the level of communication needed for sexual activity in your relationship and insist on foisting it on you at the possible cost of your own safety, you should not have sex with this person ever again. So I'm kind of on the same page with this person, and like I said, I'll chime in a little bit. Another response that got a lot of upvote says, your partner said yes. Wasn't forced to say yes, just said it. Consent was made, no force at all. That means no one raped anybody. Another response. This is a very serious accusation that your partner is claiming against you. Your partner has now shown that they give no thought as to the consequences to you. You can no longer trust them. Your first instinct might be to protect your partner in your relationship, but your number one priority here should be to protect yourself. You need them to acknowledge that it was not rape, either by text message or in recording. Check your local laws whether it's legal to tape someone without their knowledge. Plan your exit and ensure your own future. Drugs and alcohol don't seem to come into play. The person was conscious. It's not involving, as far as we know, any incest or family issues. It's not age related. Somebody wasn't under the age of consent. There doesn't seem to be any special needs or issues there that's at least mentioned. There's no mental defect. So I'm not sure diminished capacity really comes into play here. People can have consensual sexual activity that still is detrimental to their health. You can still be impacted by something that without it being illegal or without there necessarily being an abuser. Maybe they should have been more specific in this disclosure. I can only imagine how terrible it felt for that person who was participating, who no longer wanted to be doing what they were doing and were trying to retract their consent. I mean, it must have been terrible. It must have been violating to feel like you're saying no and things to just continue happening, whether it's a stranger or your partner or anybody. This is why it is so important beforehand to get consent verbally, to disclose all the information. If they would have talked about it beforehand and not just went into it again as if it was business as usual and said, reminder, this is what we're doing. Here's the safe word. If you need me to stop, please say this safe word. Do you consent? Yes, whatever it may be. And then you go from there, because then there's no confusion, no miscommunication, which I do think was the issue here. All right, let's get into our third and final Reddit post here. This one's called, I think I raped my girlfriend and I feel terrible. Today was like any regular day. I got home from school and drove over to my girlfriend's house to hang out. The day was going normal, and then the mood switched to tango time, meaning sex. And she pulled it out and then said, get the condom. I didn't hear her, so I asked her what she said, and it was inaudible once again. And then I asked again and she said, forget it, and just covered up. I said, no, I'm sorry. I just couldn't hear you. Can we still do it? And she said, no, it's fine. And then I asked again and we did it. It was normal, but in the middle of nowhere, she starts crying. I instantly stopped and pulled up my pants and pulled her into my arms and asked her what was wrong. She didn't want to tell me, but afterwards she told me that she felt forced. And I went home after that. I talked to her and she said it was fine, but I feel terrible. An update. She now claims that she can't get over it and that I sexually assaulted her. She hasn't said she loved me for the past week. Final update. We talked and I told her how it was not rape and not assault, that it was simply miscommunication. And I made it clear that if we do it again, we both need to be sure that we want to do it. All right, so let's read some responses. The first one says, it was a very bad case of miscommunication, but I assure you, you did not rape her. Agreed. OP did not rape her. Healthy advice to anyone, anywhere, is that you should always accept the first no. As someone who often engaged when I might not have wanted to, it was always because I was asked multiple times. Accept the first no and move on. And this was something else that I thought was really great. It says, my wife and I have been together 7 years. We have a safe word that means in no uncertain terms, stop right now. Sometimes if we're drunk, she screws around and uses the safe word just to see what I'll do. I'll tell you what I do. I stop and I go to bed. I don't care if I'm missing out on sex tonight. Consent isn't a joke. See you when you're sober. Sorry, I'm not Christian Grey or whatever. And I think that's super important. Here's another response. The only consent is enthusiastic consent. So in the future, if you have to convince a reluctant partner to have sex with you, OP, know that it's not real consent. Make sure your girlfriend knows that you know that now and won't ever do it again. I don't think you're horrible for not knowing this, but it's still coerced sex and you should apologize. All right, so let's break this one down a little bit. Let's talk about disclosure. Were they both aware of what they were agreeing to? And I think so. I think they were both aware of what to expect, but I'm not 100% sure that both gave consent. So let's for now kind of check that box on disclosure, because it wasn't like they were introducing something new or something was different. You know, there was this implied, they've given consent in the past to have sexual activity with one another and no new, they're both aware of what they were kind of agreeing to. Now, does competency come into play? Now, I'm not sure if competency is an issue here because it doesn't look like there was any alcohol or drugs. The person wasn't unconscious. It's not a family member. They're not, it's not pedophilia or anything like that. The person doesn't seem to be, as far as we know, have any special needs or a mental defect. Disclosure and competency can be checked off. Now, was it voluntary is the question. This was already summed up, but I think it's so important to realize.
So important to realize. Realize this, if you get nothing else out of this video.
When somebody says no,
It means no.
don't ask again. Don't try to coerce them. Now, I understand in this situation, it was a little tricky because the person said yes. They even instigated intercourse. You started to get into it, and then there was kind of miscommunication. You couldn't hear about the condom, whatever, and the person said, forget about it. The fact that she covered herself up, moved on to something else, said no, means she was kind of retracting consent. So in this case, consent was retracted. However, when you asked again, it sounds like you might have asked 1 or 2 more times after that, she eventually said yes. However, halfway through, she didn't want to be doing it. She got upset and things broke down. So this one's kind of tricky for me. I see how other people's response say, no, this isn't rape, because theoretically she said yes. She's the one that agreed. However, this is where you need to look at those things as far as verbal consent. Was she clear? Did she, when you said again, did she just kind of go through the motions and physically allow you to do it? Or did she say yes? Okay, yeah, you know what? Let's, I said yes, I retracted my answer, but I'm saying yes again, let's do it. Was she clear on that? If not, then that's not consent. Did she maybe mumble a yes, but then, again, all those nonverbal cues. Did she kind of, shut up? Did she kind of close up? Did, her arms crossed? Did she look down? Was she no longer giving you direct eye contact? Did she, was she not active in the sexual activity? Was she just kind of, a body for you to do things to? Or was she actively engaged in sexual activity? If those things didn't happen, then again, it's not really consent. So I'm not 100% sure based on all of the information that this person wrote. Regardless, I do think it's a very tricky situation, and both people, the girlfriend as well as the original poster, have learned a lesson, and in some ways might be emotional scarred from this. Nobody wants to accidentally, take advantage of somebody, and nobody wants to be taken advantage of. And in this situation, it's a sad ending. Hopefully, they work it out or at least learn from this, because it could have been avoided. There needs to be disclosure. Are you both on the same page? Do you both know what you're agreeing to? Is the person competent? Are they able to, freely and voluntarily say yes, or were they coerced? And now, as a young girl, I can tell you, when you have a boyfriend and they say, you agree to do something and then, you don't, and then they kind of push you into it or want to continue, the OP may not realize how forceful he was. As a teenage boy, or really, or woman, or anybody, some people can be a little bit more aggressive or excited about it, and the other person may not want to let them down. So they may have felt coerced into doing this or manipulated. And again, this is why it's so important to look at it as a whole. So without knowing if the person, and to me it wasn't 100% clear on this, whether the person, because this is clear, they said yes, then they retracted consent, and then it seems like where it gets wishy-washy is, did they then give consent again? And I'm not sure, given the circumstances and the information that was provided, this person verbally consented after it was rescinded and said, yes, okay, let's go ahead, verbally or non-verbally. So this one's pretty tricky, and I'd be interested in seeing what you guys have to say. So with any of these, please put your thoughts in the comments below. Specifically on this one too, I'm very interested to see what you think. And if you have any personal stories you want to share, please be sure to submit them or post them on my Reddit forum. That's CameraSweets. And I'll, potentially, if it makes sense, we'll read or discuss it in an upcoming YouTube video. So again, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to what I have to say, for coming along on this journey. Please follow me, like, subscribe, all those good things, because I have more content coming out. This is one format that I'm going to try out, but I'd also like to do kind of a documentary on, episodic documentary on Jeffrey Epstein's associates, so that we can learn a little bit more about them, how they were linked to Jeffrey Epstein, their criminal past, things like that. So if that's something you look forward to, then I thank you. Please, again, subscribe, and you'll get some notifications when those come out as well.
Thank you again. Have a great day, and I hope you learned something from this. And thank you for following me. Thank you for caring. Thank you for, I'm humbled by everybody's support, and I really hope that I can make a difference in this area. Go outside, get some fresh air, move around a bit, because mental health matters.